How often do we pause to examine the words we use, the phrases we repeat, or the idioms that slip into our conversations? From shouting fire in a crowded theater to good fences make good neighbors, our common expressions are relics of history, reshaped by time and misunderstanding. In this almost certainly not companion series, we examine each episode's origins, production process, behind the scenes, personal thoughts, and most likely go off on some tangents in spite of our best efforts. In this episode, we examine common parlance, expressions, origins, and context. I'm Layla Lawrence.
And I'm Dan Lauer.
And this is Possibly Not. I'm just going to get this out of the way, I guess, before we even dive into this episode. This episode was one that we hadn't planned on in our initial talking about Almost Certainly Not. This episode was kind of born out of Dan being a perfectionist and an artistic genius. And of course, artistic genius requires some time and some effort. And
I think you might be mispronouncing autistic.
I'm trying to be nice here.
It's that accent.
I know, artistic. So basically what it is with this episode is that you'd been working hard on 2 other episodes that are going to release in the future. And they were coming together a little bit slower than normal because obviously you want to make sure that we're putting out good material. And so this episode was kind of born into, hey, this would be something really fun that we can do. Not really fun. You don't want to do anything fun. But this could be something that would be a little bit perhaps lower effort. This would be something that can kind of come together really quick and dirty, easily, but something that also is still in the Almost Certainly Not style, and something that is still fitting of the channel and still fitting of the kind of vibe that we are going for here. I have to admit, when you first came to me with this idea, I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, you need a break. Sure, we'll knock this one out. It'll be all right. But then I saw it when the whole thing came together, and I'm so impressed. I actually really, really like this episode to the point of where I would like to do more of them. But with all that said, how did this one sort of come to you?
Everything you just said is like, like you were in the room when I made the decision.
Yeah.
I was tired, Scarlett. And I thought, I'll just be frank. I was like, there's a reason that people make list videos on YouTube, because they're easy. Because you don't have to stick with one tone or story for any length of time.
Well, can you explain what a list video is really quick as well? Because when you first said list video, I wasn't quite certain what you were talking about. I mean, I understand what a list is and I understand what a video is, but I don't think I understand what that kind of like genre is.
They're clickbaity, like top 10 most mysterious, like top 10 things science can't explain, and then you watch the video and science can explain all of them, or top 10 UFO abductions, or top 10 ghost sightings, or top 10 ways to talk a woman into anal sex, or whatever.
Well, so this is kind of like that, but also not.
Well, I set myself a little bit of a challenge to, I hope that it's a well-disguised list video. But it is just a list video. And this also has the benefit of I'm a professional writer. I'm obsessed with language. I'm obsessed with idiomatic language, maxims, expressions, the way that people consistently use them incorrectly or don't understand the context. So this, I basically wrote from memory. I think I wrote the script in about 90 minutes. I think I had to look up a couple of attributions, and that was it. So it was relatively low effort. And then, I mean, we had fun recording it, and
I think this might actually be one of the reasons. I mean, I feel like people who not necessarily know us both, but people who have heard us both or know of our personal attributes, I feel like sometimes do not understand how we work well together. Like we would be like chalk and cheese. And I feel like that might be one of the reasons why we work well together, is because while I am not as obsessive as you are about language, I am also that like grammar Nazi, I suppose, is what people used to call it. I'm sure it's not politically correct to call it that now, but you know, one of those people who's just like, you're using that word wrong. You're using it in the wrong context. And I think because of that, I'm not necessarily careful about how I speak because I can be quite manic, but I think because of that, that's one of the reasons that we do work well together, is because even though I don't present as like a higher intellect sort of person, I do, for the most part, know what you're talking about.
Well, that's an interesting statement. I don't want to go. You got the bullet points in front of you?
Yeah.
Move on down to one of the bullet points that you added. In relation to what you just said.
Yeah. So, so while I do know I do for the most part know what you're talking about. But I mean, I had so many times I'll be reading, and I've read so many of your scripts, Dan. I've read screenplays, I've read manuscripts for novels, I've read treatments for films, I've read the book, I've read articles, I've read so many of your scripts. Honestly, I couldn't even put a number on it. I think we discussed the other day, like I have some in my inbox that you even like forgot about.
I did.
The amount of times I have to stop when reading your scripts and look up what a word means is embarrassing. And I will never, I mean, I suppose this is me admitting it to you. And I think you always knew, but like sometimes I look at these words and I'm like, where? First of all, why? Why? And I mean, I know the answer. It's because you can. But I just, oh God, it's so fucking irritating sometimes. I'm just like, just say the thing. Just say the thing. You don't have to use these words that nobody's ever heard of. Just say the thing. But I know you're incapable.
It's the feeling. Writing is feeling. And I have to find the gift of phrase, and it has to be the perfect number of syllables.
I think that is bullshit. I think you just like to show your higher intellect. And I think you want people to have to look things up just to be like, you idiot. You don't know what I'm saying.
It's genuinely not. Because what you're describing there is pretentiousness, and it's not. There's no pretense. That's the word that
Okay. All right. I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
There isn't. And we actually went through this when we were recording this episode. You were very frustrated, and you asked me on more than one occasion if I was doing this on purpose because you kept getting tripped up. They were very long sentences and a lot of I don't know why. This one tripped you up more. You were very, very annoyed at me and thought I was fucking with you by the way I was writing it. And then you were like, who writes like this? But I
know the answer because it's you, because this happens all the time.
So what are you complaining about? You know.
I also think previously, like normally with these episodes, I'll read through the article that you originally posted on Substack. So I'll be like, okay, I'm familiar with what's going on here. And if I have to like look something up, I'll be like, what does that mean? And like read it over 10 times to try and figure out what it is you're saying in context. Like I can do that. But with this one just kind of like came out of the blue and I was like, oh my God.
But to be fair, you watched it and you liked it.
I did, yeah.
And it doesn't sound didactic. It doesn't sound pretentious. I think
most
people watching that video.
Didactic. What percentage of the population knows what didactic means?
Do you not?
Yes, through context I do, but have I ever used that word in my life? No, I haven't.
I don't know a better way to express that idea. I guess you could say preachy.
Yeah, see, there you go.
But that's what the word.
But I did have to ask. I don't know how many times I had to ask you what something meant in this one. I think it was only a couple of times, honestly, with like words. Just
No, you were just very, very frustrated at the way that I was. There's a lot of consonants. strung
I
together.
do. I also feel like your sentences were like quite run on in this as well. You are genuinely the king of a fucking run on sentence. And I don't know I don't remember from grade school what the definition of a run on sentence is, but good Lord, you love a just fat, juicy sentence.
Oh, I thought you were going to end that.
In a different way. Yeah, I know.
I thought that was going to have a final word.
But like, you really do love a long ass sentence for sure. But yeah, I do have to look things up that and I know you know. I think at first, when we first met, maybe for the first couple of years, I was like, he cannot know. He cannot know that I am of inferior intellect. He cannot know that I don't know what he's saying. But then I think as it went on, I was like, oh, I just don't even care. Like, you have to know that normal people don't speak like this. This is insane.
I don't know. It's just like even there. I think you know me well enough to know I didn't go through my mind what's the most complex or obscure word I can use to convey this idea. That's the way.
It's just the way your brain works. That's why I'm saying.
And that's why it can't be pretentious if there's no pretense, and there isn't. That's just the way I'm describing.
It is just the way your brain works, and that, makes you a special little flower. It really does.
Oh, I'm cutting that.
It makes you a special sort of person. That's how you think and how you write, because people don't really anymore. I think you are just like, the way that you write is really like a lost art, honestly. I feel like, I kind of want to talk about this later on, but the way that you write, I feel like, is not the way writers churn things out these days. And I don't want that to sound like a kind of like a disparaging remark, but it is in a way, I suppose.
Possibly not. I don't know. That's just, I've found my voice a long time ago, and so it becomes when you're proficient at something, because it's a value judgment about whether or not my writing is good. That's subjective, but proficiency is objective. And I've bought my first book on screenwriting when I was 14 years old. I'm 41. So, that level of to be proficient at something, or to be incredibly skilled at something, that it's a little bit, it's rudimentary, and I don't know how rooted it is in research, but that Malcolm Gladwell concept of it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become really proficient at something. I've surpassed, and I think the point, it either feels right to me or it doesn't. And you've even experienced this in real time when we are recording and I want to rewrite something, or you suggest a rewrite, I'll just do it in real time, and then I don't, the time it takes is just making it feel right, as opposed to word choices. I don't know. I think that you would have to have put the time and effort and the practice into it to really understand exactly what I mean by that, kind of in the same way that I can't know what somebody who's, a professional sports
person.
Person. The word I'm searching for is athlete.
Yes.
Or acting.
Yeah.
For instance.
Well, let me ask you this then. What is your biggest pet peeve? Like a turn of phrase that people use incorrectly, that is I know there are several. I'm sure there are several that you have, but what is the one that really just gets your goat?
Right now, it's not a single thing, but it's the way that people use, it's not a saying or a maxim or an idiom exactly, but it's the way that people, how casually people will deploy mental health diagnoses on other people, especially on social media. People will say, and the way that people don't understand what they're saying when they accuse someone of something, like that somebody's really codependent. That's a really, or like borderline. Those are really like two really have really clear definitions from a psychiatric perspective. But people use that and also assign it to them. It's like self-diagnose by being OCD. And as somebody who's been diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder by a psychiatrist, I know that they don't know what the fuck that means. Like, it's not just having your cabinets fairly organized. So it's sort of a whole subsection of that. And there's more minor ones. I mean, I think that there's some undermining that goes on with language. Like, somebody can be really triggered because their food is late, but then people who have been sexually assaulted are triggered too. And I don't think you can use the word triggered for both situations.
Yeah.
Really? I think it takes something away from it. So
there's
I think
like
it's
a
less
common,
like
I think things become like commonplace. I mean, because I know previous to knowing you and previous to your diagnosis of OCD, I know I had used the term OCD just sort of flippantly about things. And then when you got diagnosed and you told me about it and you told me about like what you were going through at the time, I was like, oh my God, I can't use this anymore. Like, I can't use this as just like a word that I say, like as like a phrase that I say to describe something, because that is like not what this is at all.
Well, it's pet peeve to me in two ways. It's about precision in language, but it's also about, obviously, I have sort of maybe the only real social kind of activist standpoint I have is directly related to mental health, just because it's touched my life in so many ways. Or that's the thing that I'm most passionate about. It's not, if somebody's using it as a shorthand for something, that's fine. But I see a lot, I think it gets very amplified. And I think that's a whole category that can irritate me. If somebody says like, oh, I had a really OCD day, and that means that they tore their whole fridge apart and cleaned it and I don't have any issue with that, but it's more like people will diagnose other people that they just don't kind of like or had a falling out with as being narcissists. And I'm like, well, that's not.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one all the time.
Or toxic, or, which is more, I guess, is more of a subjective sort of value judgment thing. But so I think it's that category that I see. And that's like, I'm exposed to that. And like, I have an Instagram account that has exactly one picture on it, which is a tile that says nothing to see here. So I'm not on Instagram. And then I think you know that. And I have a Threads account that I post things periodically, and I don't interact with anyone. I don't go to the homepage.
Well, and to be fair, your Threads account, I think, was just to sell your book.
Yeah, it was very, very cynical. And,
which is a great book, by the way. Everybody should read it.
Thank you. It's called something.
You will have to look up words as you read it, but it's a great book.
But anyway, my point is that even as little as I interact with online communities, as I've seen, like in people's little bios, they'll put that they're ADHD. And I'm of the firm opinion, and I think it is in I have a little bio pinned to the top of my Threads account. And this is true. And I say part of my biography that, like, to introduce people to me about the book and my, a little bit of a biographical history is that I endeavor to make my mental health and my sexuality the two least interesting things about me. Because if they're the most interesting things about you, you're fucking boring.
Yeah.
Work harder.
I understand that, but I also think that there's something about, I suppose, these things becoming more commonplace that makes them more accepted and less taboo as well. So I think there's a fine line to walk in between these things. And also, I mean, I am of the mindset to each their own as well. But if someone is genuinely diagnosed, I think that's something that is, But I do see a lot of like undiagnosed ADHD, and I'm like, well,
No, even if they're diagnosed, I don't think I don't like the implication that because you're ADHD, if you're in your bio ADHD and bisexual, what does that really tell me about you?
Oh,
other
you're about
than
to
those
piss
two
off
things?
so many people, man.
I don't care because it's like really disinteresting because the groups of people or even people who have those things in common, I can't guess I shouldn't be able to guess anything else about you. Like people who are bisexual as a cat, like what else should I be able to intuit about the rest of your life? All of which should be more interesting than the fact that you were born with asexuality.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I feel like it's more about representation. It's about seeing these things and perhaps people feeling like they're less alone.
I think it's a little look at me.
Well, I mean, there is that as well.
I'm not saying that it shouldn't be discussed or they could find their communities that way. I don't know. That's my opinion.
You're also like a grumpy old bastard as well. I mean, you should probably put that in your bio.
I'm a miserable fuck. But I also don't think that that's like I don't know how healthy it is to be proud of something that you haven't worked to achieve.
Yeah, that you have no control over.
Yeah, I'm not proud to be, I think there's a distinction with a difference between like, for people who are underserved or underrepresented, like gay pride parades or LGBT pride parades, it should be less about pride and more that like we're not, we need to be represented and we're here. But I don't put I'm not really proud of anything that I didn't work for or earn. I think that's sort of anathema to the concept of pride. But anyway, I'm probably going to cut all of that. That's unnecessary.
That's your pet peeve, basically. That's your pet peeve is people using
frivolously.
Using
especially
terms frivolously.
Like to your point, if somebody says that in conversation, and to the point of the episode, something like OCD has entered the common parlance as a way to express the idea of somebody who's
particular
and fastidious and persnickety and just like everything in its right place, and they don't understand. And I don't have an issue with that necessarily because it's not an accusation. If they're saying it about themselves, that's not exactly what I'm saying. I know that they don't know what that means, and I know that they've never cried because they can't stop washing their hands. But I don't have issue with that. But I think the way that it's mental health terms can be weaponized against other people, just sort of randomly.
I certainly agree. Yeah.
And people don't know. They don't know what borderline means, and they don't know what codependency means. Those are personality disorder diagnoses that a professional needs to make. So
that have kind of just been adopted into common vernacular.
And it's a way to weaponize the word against somebody and other people. I think a lot of people misunderstand what codependent or borderline means in the same way, again, because it's in the common parlance.
This could be a whole other episode, I think, honestly.
Yeah. But so I guess that would be it right now. I don't have any. Well, here's the problem. It's not a problem to me, but it's a problem to answer your question more specifically. Is I don't talk to enough.
You just don't interact with enough people.
Misuse something like jack of all trades very often.
Yeah.
So that's just, and I don't know, social media amplifies everything. So I've seen a fair amount of that.
Yeah.
How does that translate to actual life? Which, by the way, social media isn't. It's vapor. But I don't know. But that's the one that sprung to mind immediately. I can't think of a specific, like something like
I have a specific.
Jack of all trades. I'm all ears. I think I know what it is, and I'm wondering if you're going to want to keep it in the episode.
I don't. Well, I have two specific, and I mean, I get very irritated with people who use words incorrectly, and I have got better about correcting people because I feel like it's a real dick move to correct people. But one. Not a real dick move to correct people, but to correct people that I don't know, that I don't have a vested interest in, that I can't be like, hey, just so you know, you're using this. Like I correct my husband all the time.
Well, you see what I did there, though, because you said got, and then it was begotten.
That's
so I
true.
you.
Yes, that's very true. So for someone to correct someone that I don't have a vested interest in is like I don't do that anymore. But especially on social media, and I guess this is popular because of like the coffee culture at the moment or something like that. People who don't know the coffee, people love coffee here. Like it's just like not here, not where I am now, but I feel like the coffee is like a thing now. Like you can go to a coffee shop and you get fucking art in your coffee. You know, like people are doing like drizzles and shit in your coffee. And not drizzles of shit, but like drizzle, like they make pictures in your coffee and like there's different kinds of coffee and it's like a whole thing. Anyway, but my point is,
yes,
people will say, hey, I'm going to put some whipped cream on this. And I can't explain
like a
cappuccino? You. Yes, but I can't explain to you how irritating it is that someone says, I'm going to put whipped cream on this. W-H-I-P. W-H-I-P cream. It makes my brain explode because I'm like, here's the thing. It's called whipped cream.
Slow down. I can't tell you how shrill you sound. Take a breath. Calm down. You're turning off all the male listeners.
I get so angry. I get so angry about it.
Oh, let me make sure I understand. So it is that they're adding whipped cream to their coffee.
Yes.
I thought you meant that they were having a cappuccino and adding foam and calling that whipped cream.
No. The actual whatever the fuck is on their coffee, I don't care about. It's the word. It's them using WHIP cream to describe whipped cream upon their coffee. Yeah. Cream that has been whipped. Past tense. And they say, I'm going to put whip cream on this. And I'm like, no, you whip cream to create whipped cream. They are two different things. Like please add oh my God, I don't know why. Do you remember I'm sure you remember my irrational hatred of pinky rings? This is like my irrational hatred of pinky rings. There are so many other things in the world to get upset about, but this is the one. It's not the misuse of there, and there. It's not the misuse of your and your, which, granted, are silly, but it's whipped cream, people. Like, please, for the love of all that exists, it's whipped cream. That's what you put on your coffee, on your pie, on your cake, on your whatever.
I haven't encountered this, or I've missed it because I don't. I don't think you associate
with. Yeah, I don't think you associate with the sort of people who would be talking about this, but I see it so often. I don't want to say once a day, but I want to say at least once a week. I see it.
Well, and there's other examples like that where people mishear or something, and then like I've heard blessing in the skies. Well, it's blessing in disguise. So I think that people mishear it.
What?
I've heard people say blessing. It's a blessing in the skies.
Oh, the skies. Okay, all right. I was like, oh my God, am I saying this wrong?
No. So it's blessing in disguise. It's a blessing in disguise. But so I think that falls in the same category. I mean, I think that you're right. I think it's pretty intuitive. It's cream that was whipped before you got to it. So
I don't understand.
You don't not sound unhinged.
No, I'm fully aware that I sound unhinged. As I have said, it is an irrational pet peeve of mine. I mean, I feel like all pet peeves are irrational. When something just really pushes your buttons so much that it becomes a pet peeve, and that is an irrational thing for me. Also, one that I will fight till I take my dying breath, and I think at this point my husband just does it to piss me off. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Okay? Yeah. It's a comparison. Mm-hmm. Yes? Mm-hmm. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. My husband, bless him.
Well, it's actually the opposite.
Well, yes.
It's an equivalence.
Yes. But my husband, bless his little Kissimmee-educated heart.
Ooh. Fighting words.
No, I love him so much, but he will be the first to admit that he didn't pay attention in school anyway, and he did not go to the best school. So he will be the first to admit. This
is disconcerting because he sold me a house.
He, in later life, became very intelligent and applied himself. But in his, like, schooling years, there are some things that he says sometimes. I'm like, did you not pay attention in school? Did you not pay attention at all? I don't understand.
Oh, my God.
But
to be a fly on the wall.
He has said, and I can't even, it was this years ago he said this. He said 6-1 to me. And I remember we were in the car. He said 6-1. He goes, well, 6-1. And I went,
those are
6-1.
That's betting odds.
What are we, the dog track? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean 6-1? Well, 6-1, you know? And I was like, I don't understand. Like, I genuinely was lost when he said this. And I went, wait.
I actually like those odds, because if I lay 100,
yeah,
but I
was like,
600 back.
You mean 6 of one? And he goes, no, it's not. It's 6-1, half a dozen of the other. And I went, no. And in that moment, I questioned our relationship. I really did.
I genuinely think that some people use that expression with the right words in the right order and don't necessarily understand that it's a way to express the idea that the two options are identical.
Yes. Yeah.
And to say 6 or half a dozen are two ways of saying 6. Yeah. So they're an equivalency. So if somebody says, do you want to get punched in the face or kicked in the balls? I don't want either. So I would say if you're forcing me to make a choice,
it's not really a choice.
It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah, it
so
doesn't
if
matter.
I have to get one, I don't know that I have a real preference. So that yeah. Well, I'm sure he's going to love you broadcasting that.
I mean, he knows. That's, and I think, well, that's what I'm saying. I think at this point, I think the first time he said it, he genuinely was confused. Like, he genuinely thought he had been saying it the correct way. And when I sort of explained it, I think it made more sense. And then I think it became his hill to die on because he knew it pissed me off. You know, you got to keep things spicy in a relationship sometimes.
Well, I think that's something that we talked about, and something that I think that I'll say that, I mean, I'm in this episode, I've already said things that'll piss people off. I'll say another one, potentially. I really think that we're not touching anything political. This is going to be a very broad statement, but the state of, I really boil down the foibles that's all I'm going to say is the foibles of society and culture at the moment to two things that I think can explain it all. Is that people in general don't know how stupid they are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost forgivable because in order to know how, you have to have a certain amount of intelligence to understand how stupid you are. And there's also ego wrapped up in that. Incidentally, I'm including myself in that. We are not good at understanding the things that we don't understand very well because we don't understand them very well.
Which is mad because there's arguably more information out there than ever before.
But the thing is like, what does it require to understand how bad you are at something is requiring like the skills to understand what it takes to be good at the thing. So you almost lack the knowledge that's required. So it's kind of an infinite regression there. But people, their opinions and their feelings are sort of good enough for them. And it's also a lack of curiosity.
Yeah.
Is it why to use that expression? If he or anyone else who uses that expression or my example, blessing in the skies. I mean, I guess you could get to some sort of a religious thing with blessing in the sky. You could almost get somewhere to say that it's like out of the blue. But it wouldn't really be applicable because it would be like, I fell down a hole and broke my leg, but I found gold in the hole. That's a blessing in disguise, right?
Yeah, Jesus put it down there for you.
But so, I mean, so I would be interested in somebody who said, who had that situation happen and said it's a blessing in the skies. It actually happened in the ground. So have a little bit of curiosity about like why would that be
Sky Daddy has
applicable?
control over everything. I don't think you understand how this works.
Don't say Sky Daddy. Also, you said something. You said something about something that slaps or slapped.
That was something.
Don't.
I didn't say that in this episode. I was writing it in our Notion notes.
No. You put it on Threads.
Oh, I know, you're right. I did put it on Threads. Yeah, I said something slapped.
Yeah. Don't do that.
It slaps.
And that goes on my list.
Oh,
I don't know what the fuck that means.
Okay.
But there's a lack of curiosity and like and you know, not to pick on your husband, but it's interesting to me. I don't do this. I like to be precise, and I like to be expressing the thing that I am meaning to express. And I think that what it means is, at least in his case, and for people who say blessing in the skies, or I'm trying to think of another example of that, where it's basically just they're using the wrong word because it's like basically a in that case, it's a homophone, disguise and disguise. Sound so similar.
Well, it's like a game of telephone, isn't it? It all gets kind of diluted, and then you hear it one way, and you go, "Oh, that's the way you say it, I suppose."
But what it has to mean is that he never or people who make that mistake never consider what the meaning of the phrase. Because if you 6 to 1, half a dozen the other is like, I like to gamble, so I understand gambling odds. 6 to 1, half a dozen the other is it's meaningless.
Yeah.
And so it means that there was never any curiosity or consideration about like, well, what am I trying to express when I say this, and how does that align to the words that I'm using?
I think that could be true, but I also think it is like we are in a bit of an echo chamber these days as well. So like you won't necessarily have someone correct you if the people that you associate with are also saying it wrong. And this is kind of like, I mean, your social media tangent as well. It's the same thing. Like nobody is researching things in the way that things are supposed to be researched independently and with thoughtfulness, because you were just screaming into an echo chamber most of the time. You surround yourself with people who think like you. You're on social media. Your algorithm is directing you towards people who think like you. And so I think these things just like never get corrected, and it just becomes generally accepted as, yeah, that's right. And I mean, you're right, as in people don't really think about what they're saying. There is no precision in language because people aren't thinking about what they're saying. They're just thinking like, oh, well, this is how I've heard it, and this is what it must mean.
Yeah.
But it is weird that it's like there's so many resources available to us now.
Well, there are, but like a great example of how this sort of it has a cascading effect. Because unless I'm mistaken, and I don't think that I am, I think that this is actually literally true, which will become ironic in a moment, is that because of the way that people constantly misuse literally to mean figuratively, in the OED, literally is now, the definition of the word literally means both literal and figurative. Like they actually updated the definition of it.
Well, and that's the other thing. They do update definitions of things with how we use them in common expression, which, to be honest, I don't necessarily agree with. I do understand that language is fluid and it evolves over time, but I don't agree with all of the ones that get updated or all the ones that I've seen.
Well, and you can get mad about that, and that's sort of like, there is a little bit of didacticism in this episode, which is like, you know, I think the most interesting one to me, and the thing that I hear people use incorrectly to the spirit of it, or the two that are used most often incorrectly to the spirit of the intention of the original expression, are jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than master of one. The way that it's commonly deployed means exactly the opposite of what the person's intending to say.
Yes, correct. Yeah. You're basically diminishing someone by saying jack of all trades, master of none.
And especially, so if you're going to use the phrase, that specific phrase, to express the idea, you're doing it with exactly the opposite intention. The same is true of good fences make good neighbors.
I had
That's
not heard that
usually
one until you put that in this episode. I had not heard that
that's
one.
surprising to me. I feel like that's such a common expression, but it typically is you like stay out of your neighbor's business.
Mm-hmm.
They'll stay out of yours. Build a tall fence. They, and just don't get in other people's business. And what I think is interesting about that, because I'm familiar, because I've read The Mending Wall by Robert Frost, is that is what the antagonist of the poem keeps repeating, and Robert Frost, either himself, if he's the protagonist, or whoever the protagonist of the poem is questioning why that would be necessary, why that should be necessary. It's from a philosophical perspective. So, I guess if you could be taking the shitty neighbor, the antagonist side, but that's what I don't think you realize that what you're doing. If you take that position, is that you're siding with the villain of that poem. And so those stand out to me. But
that
there is also something to be
said.
said.
I think
It does, but there is something to be said for the way, to your point, the fluidity of language, especially when it comes to idiomatic language, which is like, which we don't really touch on, which is an expression that evolves over time, that you either know what it means or you don't. Like, you either know, like, if you are a non-English speaker or you're young, there's no way for you to figure out by context what kick the bucket means unless you've ever heard that's a euphemism or idiomatic language for someone dying.
Yes.
And there was actually a personal story that somebody in my life told me about them when they were a child, like, to this point, had never heard that. And she was at a friend's house, and they said something about like a second uncle or something, or a great uncle having bought the farm. And she was like, "Oh, that's exciting. Where is the farm?" And she just, I don't know, she was like 9 or 10. And so she just never heard that before. And there's no way for
Bought the farm is also like such a weird one. I mean, bought the farm and kick the bucket are both such strange ones.
Yeah, but there's no way, an idiom is, there's no way for you to intuitively understand what the expression means in context of the conversation you're currently having unless you already know what it is. And so,
it's like an inside joke of the English language.
It sort of is, and it drives non-English speakers crazy, but or second English as a second language people crazy, because there's no way to get there, other than just knowing it and memorizing it. Yeah, you just have to know.
It's like a secret.
But those expressions have value, as does in a lot of art, changing, like having a phrase or a term and then deliberately changing it to add irony or allegory also has value. So that's not really what I'm objecting to. And I think, Shakespeare famously invented, 1,000 expressions.
Well, and that's what I'm kind of more familiar with as an actor is having these things in a script, but allocating a different meaning to it.
So I'm not, and I think that that's perfectly viable, but it's sort of like in any art, kind of a precept of taking up an art, whether it's acting. And I'm sure, I don't know if it was Stanislavski or who you studied, but in writing, in actual painting and sculpture, a basic precept tends to be that you need to be really, really familiar with and understand the rules so that you can break them.
So you can break them, yeah. 100%. 100%.
And so, but I feel like it necessitates understanding the phrase in the first place to use it for irony, to use it in an ironic context. And that's how it can take on a different meaning, especially if that catches on through time.
Yeah.
Like something like salad days, I think originated with Shakespeare, which people still use to mean sort of our glory days, something in the past, something that'll never be as green again. So something can either be invented, like salad and days. He added those two words together. He
invented whether it was him or somebody else, which is a discussion for another day, invented so many sayings. Like, I feel like at some point he was just throwing words just together for no reason.
But I think that partially what's interesting to me about that is if you invent an expression, like whoever watched the audience for those plays would have been like, what the fuck does salad days mean?
Yeah. But then
What
it
does that
catches
mean?
on. It catches on and
It
people
does.
use it in language, don't they?
So I just wanted to make that point clear, especially as a writer, that I can't think of a specific example, but I'm sure that I have deployed phrases out of context deliberately to make the opposite point of what they're intended for.
Mm-hmm.
But that's completely viable. But you have to really understand what it's supposed to mean first. You have to know the rule before you break it.
Well, I
But I
think that
don't. I
also
wanted.
goes into like the value of being wrong, and like not taking something personally, because I mean, and this is specifically talking about acting because this is something that I have experience with, where you are reciting someone else's words. I think so much of acting is being wrong. And having to learn. But the thing is not being afraid to be wrong, not being afraid to look stupid, because that's when you find the good stuff, as it were. But I think that kind of gets into having to learn about these things, and like you said, the more you learn and the more you are confident on a subject or about something, that's when you can break the rules.
I agree. I think it's the same. I've learned. Yeah, it's the same for writing. I do a certain amount of painting. I play the
Yeah.
guitar.
I think perhaps
And
it is
so,
these artistic fields are where it is more acceptable to be wrong, though. It's like not one of those things, because I hear, fake it till you make it so much. And I think that happens so much with people that it kind of gets to a point that they forget to kind of check themselves. Whereas I think in artistic fields, yeah, you can try and fake it till you make it, but it's not really going to work out for you. Like, you have to be
it
curious.
depends.
You have to be, willing to be wrong. You have to be willing to research. You have to be willing to.
And it depends on your chosen. I don't want my pilot to fake it till they make it.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. Of course. I think just as it refers to language, I suppose, is what I mean, or as it refers to things that can be lost over time. I think in an artistic field, it's about the experimentation. It's about, that kind of finding where the line is. Whereas in other professions, it isn't necessarily like that. It is more black and white, and people want to be right about things.
Well, and you don't gotta get racial about it. But I. Well, to your former point, though, I think that's true. And as we were recording this, another thing that people can hear in the directed voiceover session is you stopped on more than one occasion and said, "This is too nice. You don't actually feel this way.
Yeah.
This is not what you think."
Well,
and you're not wrong. That was so the script that the episode is based on was version 2. With a little less, with fewer claws,
a little
in
less
it.
stank than the first one,
a little less vitriol, and so I toned down. I guess I don't want to be dramatic, but my unbridled rage, barely contained nuclear rage.
Yeah, you're over here judging my rage over whipped cream, and God knows your rage is.
I sound very calm.
You sound so calm. Well, this is why women are too emotional to run a country,
This is awkward because I agree. Are you being sarcastic, or do we?
That was sarcasm. Yes, that was sarcasm.
But you said you actually stopped in the last section. You said this is bullshit. This is not how you feel, and you're being way too soft. And you're partially right in as much as, like, I'm not. What is the point of the video? The point of the video is to elucidate and maybe give some context to phrases that it's kind of a fun one. Oh, I hope people, at least for 2 or 3 of those. Oh, I didn't know that was how that started.
Yeah.
I'm not even trying to necessarily change the way that people use it. It's just like, it's a little bit of history too.
Just in case you wanted to use this in the correct way.
Yeah. But the thing that you objected to is like, I put it softly, but I do genuinely believe this. And I think that people do take it personally as opposed to listening closely and clearly and using it as an opportunity to enjoy. Well, I said, there's a joy in being wrong. And then you said, when are you ever, but you're never wrong.
Yeah, you
And
fucking hate
obviously
being
that's not true.
wrong. You hate being wrong.
But those are two different things. It's not that I'm never wrong. It's that I'm never wrong twice.
You are correct there. I will agree with that. You are correct. You are very, and I don't know the word for it, but you are very, I don't know, particular about.
I have that curiosity.
Yeah.
And it extends beyond language, right? It's not just about your expression. And I also tie, because how do we express our thoughts other than like, there's body language and there's, facial expressions and stuff like that. But other than violence or body language, we express our thoughts through language. So the quality of our thinking, the quality of our language is only as good as the quality of our thinking, and the quality of our thinking is only as good as the quality of our language. And so, but it also, so it's all tied together, and I don't take it personally if I think that there's something to it. Even if it's an idea, a firmly held idea, or something that I think is true that I find out not to be true, I'm not embarrassed. I'm like, how great. Okay. I'm never going to be wrong about that. I'm going to go, I'm not going to take anybody's word for it.
Mm-hmm.
But then it'll send me down the path of finding out for sure, or at least like to the best that whatever the thing is can be known. And I'm like, well, I understand that better now. How great. I don't know why anyone wouldn't. It's bizarre to me that anyone wouldn't feel that way. And that's what I mean about a lack of curiosity, is that I feel like there's a certain number of people, or a certain segment of the population, maybe a rather high percentage, where the first thing they heard about anything is good enough for them.
Yeah.
And they're going to take it really personally.
Well, and it elicits a feeling. And I think when you attach a feeling to something, I think that's when you don't want to explore any other option.
You lost me slightly. A what?
Oh God, am I wrong using this word as well? No, I'm scared to use these words.
No, say what you said again.
I was saying when someone tells you something that elicits a feeling.
That right there. What? A what?
That's what it is. A feeling. Yeah. Well, I think that's what it is though. When you're saying people will hear something once and then accept that, I think it's because when people hear something, it elicits a feeling within them, and that just kind of like solidifies with them. And they're like, all right, well, that's my opinion on that now.
Oh, I'm genuinely not being sarcastic. Do you mean like hunger? What do you mean by feeling?
Well, like if someone, I mean, as far as curiosity goes.
I think I'm being too vague. I'm trying to, the joke is that I'm a psychopath.
Oh, well, no, I realize that when I realize the lack of feeling. Yes.
I'm just pretending to not know what feelings are.
An absolute fucking twat you are. Anyway, so, talking about all this and kind of wrapping it up, but do you think this is going to continue? I think that technology plays a role in this, as far as like it is so easy to find, as I said previously, the echo chamber to your thoughts. Like it's so easy to do that. And I feel like as technology evolves, I feel like there is a loss of the meaning of language, the meaning behind the words, because it becomes less like art and more like just having to get the information out in the most concise way possible.
It does, but it also, like, I want to be pragmatic. Like as an example, I think that it's like this is a very the episode is pretty narrow. It's about historical expressions and maxims and idioms to a certain extent that are commonly misused. Whether we like it or not, like language ends up belonging to the generation behind us. And as a, like, we're not the same age, but we're in the same generation. I understand, like, to that example, you said something about something that slaps, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I assume that part of that was just to irritate me.
Oh, it was 100%. Yeah.
And I can understand from context that probably means is really, really good. It's a good thing.
Yes. Yeah. I honestly, I think I'm behind the times on that one as well, because I don't think that's actually a word that the youths use anymore. So I think I'm probably geriatric in my using of that as well.
But as much of a grumpy old fuck as I am, I know how we did this. And what's normal to us in expression, like the way that people use cringe, or the way that people say, I can't think of any others.
Oh, there are some rough ones now, man. I'm sure you haven't heard, but my friends who have kids who are in like the middle school age, there are some rough ones now.
Yeah, but the thing is like whether I don't talk to teenagers,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's not a problem for me. And as grumpy as I can be about these things, like it or not, language belongs to the young, because they're gonna we're gonna die, and they're the one. I mean, I'm gonna leave things behind in my language, and maybe someday post Meridiem will be read in the same way that like On the Road is read, where the language is like you could see the quality of it and dare I say beauty of it, but it bears little to no resemblance to the way that people speak anymore.
No sense. Yeah.
But that's the way that it evolves. And I think that there are things that are like, I think that something that's interesting is cool.
Like, I feel like that was from our generation, though, wasn't it? Like
it was not. I actually have a distinct memory of being young, being a teenager, and calling things cool to mean good, or that I liked it, and my mother remarking how interesting it was that when she was a kid, they said that things were cool. So some things persist, and some things, like, I don't know, the slaps thing, or maybe other things that you're thinking of, will be a trend that comes and goes very quickly. But I think that it's hard to tell which is which, and as silly and stupid as it might sound to old people like us, it kind of doesn't belong to us anymore.
Yeah, I like that.
So
I don't think I'd ever thought about it in that way, but I mean, you are correct, as you always are.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean I think that incorporating, like, we get locked into the way that we speak, I think, and stop sort of adopting new euphemistic language probably in our late 20s, early 30s. So I don't know that, like, even to say the word slaps out loud in that context takes a little bit out of my soul.
I think when I use it out loud, it's just more of like a little tongue in cheek. Like there's a little wink to it when I use it out loud, that I'm like, yeah, this word is not mine. I'm not, but this is not something I would normally say.
But we are, well, like, going back all the way to the beginning, talking about how different our personalities are, and people being confused about why we're friends and why we work so well together. Let's say that, for argument's sake, that I use that in earnest. I think it might make you nauseous.
I would be so very uncomfortable.
Or you might be worried about me.
Yes, as I am worried about you when you are being nice in an episode, telling people that they're using language in the wrong way.
Let me say, by the way, Scarlett, that I think that as far as the voiceover, this is some of the best, not only from you in this episode, but that I've ever heard anywhere. Like David Attenborough, Morgan Freeman level voiceover work.
Okay.
So
all right.
I didn't want to let it go unsaid that you're magic.
I can't even. No.
And you do such a great job.
I've dropped my bloody headphone because you're making me so uncomfortable.
Well, I was curious as a trained actress and having studied and performed
I'm sorry, you're
Shakespeare.
curious about something that I've done? What?
Do you have what is your rate for nudity? 50 a day?
Free, obviously. I'm an actor. Come
Oh,
on.
okay. No. Having studied and performed Shakespeare, do you have any favorite that you happen to know he invented?
No, I'm going to say not off the top of my head. It's a million miles from my consciousness these days. So I couldn't even bring one to mind, truly.
Do you enjoy Shakespeare?
I have a love-hate relationship with Shakespeare. In the way that I find his storytelling to be obviously some of the most beautiful storytelling ever. But
a lot of big words.
Well, and in that way, I don't want to compare you to Shakespeare.
Oh, Jesus.
But I might.
Oh, I'm ready for it. Yes.
In that way, I find
I'm gonna come.
I find your writing to be similar in that way to his, where I feel like he just used these outlandish words just for the fuck of it. Like, and I know you say you use it because that's the way you hear it in your head and that's the way whatever. I genuinely have a theory that he was just fucking with people. Like, it was just like, what is the most absurd way that I can say this thing? And then that was what he wrote.
I have an issue, Scarlett, because I don't, I have no faith really in anything. Mm-hmm. Is there something that would be meaningful to you in any way that I could swear on that I did not write? I have never written a script just to fuck with you that I knew you would trip up on. Is there any meaningful?
I don't think there is. I don't. I will.
No.
I will trust
my son.
You. I will. Oh no! Please don't do that. I will. I will trust you on that. I will trust you on that. But I think it is just like, I don't want to say superior intellect because I don't want to stroke your ego. But I think Shakespeare did have a superior understanding of language. I think you have a superior understanding of language, and I think that sometimes you will go for the more complex way of saying something than the very easy way of saying something, I think, is more to my point. Because that's your style or not is besides the point. Like, yeah, that's obviously it is your style to say something in a more complex way and perhaps a more nuanced way.
Well, what's interesting and what I'm curious about,
slapping it on the wall.
Yes, that is my style. But what's interesting is when I'm writing fiction, because I've written a number of screenplays with parts for you.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think that I am capable, because this is very important in screenwriting, is that every character, I think that there's a major pitfall for writers is that every character sounds like the author.
Yes.
And you've read a lot of my stuff. Do you think that I am capable of, some of like Pennyrile or Berlin? I feel like the characters that I wrote with you in mind, I endeavor to make them not speak the way that I speak.
You make them dumber for me?
Well, I didn't want to put it exactly that way, but
no, I think you are. I think you are correct. I'm not really referencing your screenplays. I think more just kind of like your articles and the novel and things like that. But I think it is just because you just have that knowledge. You use that knowledge, and that's nothing to be upset about or to find fault in. But I think it's kind of that same way with Shakespeare. Obviously, I wasn't around, but I think he just had a greater breadth of knowledge of language and the way language operates and the way that you can, like we said previously, you have a great understanding of something, and that's when you can break the rules. And I think that's what he did. I think he had an incredible understanding of the language of the time, and he broke the rules several times. And I think sometimes he did it just for fun. I think sometimes it was just for fun.
It is for fun for me. And like I said, the way I like to think about it is because it's never about going out of my way to make the to say something that could be described simply in the most complex way, but to find I don't have a better way to say it than a gift of phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could say you're really great to someone, or you could say, really, throughout my entire life, I've never felt this way about someone before.
Yes, and it would have greater meaning.
And you're expressing on balance, you're sort of expressing the same idea. And the second one takes more words, but I also think there's a bigger impact in it.
Of course,
so it's not. It isn't genuinely. It's not arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
Do I do it for fun sometimes? Yes. Do I see how far I can push it and what I can get away with? Yes. Do I enjoy the run-on sentence? I certainly do, because it becomes an unbroken rhythm. And that's what I mean about feeling as opposed to thinking with writing, is that it needs to feel right. And you get to, I sort of probably the same process you went through as an actress and a performer. You have to get comfortable with your voice. And then once you do, and once you find it, you can evolve it slightly, but you can never let anyone tell you that it's not okay, because it's specific to you.
Yes.
That's your voice. They might not like it, but when you find it, I don't think you should deviate. I just want to make it clear that I've never had the thought, with one exception, that I'm going to do this right now because I know it's going to fuck her up. And you might know what I'm referring to. Do you?
I'm not sure, honestly.
Oh, okay. I think it works, but we have an episode that hasn't been released yet and won't be released when this is, where I knew in advance, and I said in advance, I'm going to introduce the word Kafkaesque in between two other words. And the original sentence was, they found themselves in a surreal nightmare. And as you were doing it, I said, am I dicing with danger to put the word Kafkaesque in between surreal and nightmare? And you said no. And then I think it took us 7 minutes.
Well, okay. So the first issue was that I was adding a T in Kafka, which
you did. You said Kafkaesque.
I guess I've just never. I mean, it's not something that I have done a lot of research on. I've not done a lot of research on Kafka. I don't know. Or the works or anything like that. For some reason in my brain, there was a T in the word. And then as I was like, wait, no, there's not a T in the word. But I could not for the life of me rewire my brain to understand that there was not a T in that word. And then the fact that it was in between, what was it? Surreal?
Nightmare.
Surreal Kafkaesque nightmare is just like when you're trying to say it in a precise way and not just in like casual conversation. Oh my God.
I did.
So irritating.
So to be clear, I think that was me rewriting on the fly, and I think that enhanced, for anyone who knows Kafka.
Yeah, personally, everyone knows Kafka.
Knows the works of Kafka, you bitch. That will enhance, give greater imagery. That said, I was like, this is gonna fuck her up and it's gonna be funny. I did do that on purpose. And I was right. But that is genuinely the only example of that I have. I've never done that intentionally other than that time. So that was fun. That said, the version, the surreal Kafkaesque nightmare, remains in the audio. It will be part of the episode. And I think it adds something to it. So the 90 minutes or so we spent trying to get you to say that sentence correctly was totally worth it.
Hilarious. It was hilarious. Oh my God. So this is what I'm saying, that you said you would swear on your set, whatever. I do think there are some instances where you do things just to mess with me. And it's not all the time, but I think sometimes you have.
Yeah. Prove it.
I'm Layla Lawrence.
And I'm Dan Lauer.
And this has been possibly not.